For the soldiers who would one day land there, it wouldn't feel like a battlefield. It would feel like walking into a trap, and behind those defenses was one of Germany's most respected commanders, Erwin Rommel. Rommel was not inexperienced. He was not careless. He understood warfare in a way few others did, and more importantly, he understood his enemy. He knew the Allies would come. He knew they had no choice. But what made him dangerous was that he didn't underestimate them. He strengthened the defenses, reinforced weak points, prepared for multiple scenarios, and unlike many others, he didn't rely on hope. He relied on preparation, which meant one thing: if the Allies attacked the wrong place, or at the wrong time, the result wouldn't just be failure, it would be catastrophe. Thousands of soldiers lost in a single day, an invasion crushed before it could even begin, and possibly a delay that could change the entire outcome of the war. So the question became unavoidable: where do you attack when every option feels like a death sentence? Because choosing the wrong beach could cost everything, and choosing the right one still didn't guarantee success. The closer they got to the decision, the heavier the silence became. Maps covered tables. Generals debated for hours. Every detail analyzed. Every possibility considered. But no matter how much they planned, one problem remained unsolved. A problem that no amount of firepower could fix. Because even if they chose the perfect location, even if everything went exactly as planned, there was still one factor they couldn't control: the enemy's reaction. If the Germans realized where the real invasion was happening, they would respond with everything they had. Reinforcements would arrive, defenses would tighten, and the narrow window of opportunity would disappear. Which meant the Allies weren't just fighting an army. They were fighting time, and uncertainty, and something even more dangerous: expectation. Because the Germans weren't blind, they were watching, waiting, analyzing every movement, looking for signs, patterns, clues, anything that could reveal the truth. And if they found it, everything would collapse. So now the situation had become something far more complex than a simple invasion. It wasn't just about landing troops. It was about controlling what the enemy believed. Because, in a war like this, reality wasn't always the most important thing. Perception was. And that realization changed everything. Because suddenly, the question was no longer, where do we attack? But something far more dangerous: what do we make them believe? There's something history rarely shows you. Not the battles, not the explosions, not the chaos, but the moments before everything changes. The silence. Because before one of the most important operations of World War II, there was hesitation. Not fear, but something far more dangerous: doubt. Inside dimly lit rooms, far away from the battlefield, the leaders of the Allied forces faced a reality they couldn't ignore. Every plan they had, every scenario they studied, every strategy they built, all led to the same conclusion: a direct invasion could fail, not because they lacked strength, not because they lacked men, but because the enemy was ready. The coastline of Europe wasn't just defended, it was waiting, and that changed everything. Because when your enemy is waiting for you, you are already at a disadvantage. The Germans didn't need to know the exact location. They didn't need to know the exact time. All they needed to know was that something was coming. And they knew. Under the command of Erwin Rommel, defenses were not just built, they were refined. Every beach studied, every possible landing point analyzed, every weakness reduced. Rommel understood something critical. The invasion wouldn't be decided inland. It would be decided in the first few hours, at the shoreline. And if the Allies failed to break through in that moment, there would be no second chance, no regroup, no recovery, just failure. And the weight of that reality started to change the way the Allies were thinking, because suddenly, winning wasn't just about attacking. It was about surviving the first impact. And that's when a different kind of idea began to take shape. Not louder, not more aggressive, but smarter. What if, Instead of forcing their way through the strongest defenses, they made the enemy look somewhere else. At first it sounded almost too simple, even risky, because deception in war wasn't new. But this would be something else entirely, something bigger, something that wouldn't just confuse the enemy, but control how they reacted. Because if they could control that, they could control the battlefield without even being there. And that idea, quietly, started to grow. It moved from a suggestion to a discussion, from a discussion to a plan, and then to something much more dangerous. A decision. Because once they chose deception, there was no turning back. They wouldn't just be risking soldiers anymore. They would be risking everything on a lie that had to be perfect, a lie that couldn't fail, because if the enemy saw through it, the consequences wouldn't just be tactical, they would be catastrophic. Thousands of lives, depending on whether the enemy believed something that wasn't real. And somewhere in that silence, that heavy, suffocating silence, they realized something. This wouldn't just be part of the plan. This would be the plan. And once that truth settled in, everything changed. Because now, they weren't preparing for a battle. They were preparing to manipulate reality itself. Because the moment they asked that question, they stopped planning a battle and started creating a lie so big, so detailed, so convincing, that it would fool one of the most powerful armies in the world. But to do that, they would need something never attempted before. Not a weapon, not a strategy, but an illusion. And in the next part, you'll see how they created an army that didn't exist. Sequizar, J-Mando, a part 2 no mesmo, nivel and amaze, insana, plus prompts sincronizados, com cada, sina provoca, scholar, no gerador de imagem, e produzir rapido.